I was 20 years old in 1971 and looking for something, some guidance to what I should be doing with my life. And at that time, a Back to Godhead magazine came to me inexplicably. And I knew that I was supposed to find some answer in there, even though to me it seemed very foreign. I had never heard of India, really. And this magazine, the front of it was so unusual looking, but I just knew that I was supposed to open it. And I did, and the first article I came to did not make sense to me, but I knew I was supposed to keep turning the pages, and I came upon his words, the poem that he wrote on board the Jaladuta. And the situation in America, as everyone knows, was so turbulent. We were on the brink of a revolution, at least a cultural revolution, and so much fighting between people who were very liberal and people who were ultra-conservative, like serious fighting. And it was the Vietnam War, and we were seeing our brothers and friends being killed for something we couldn't understand. It was so much turbulence, and how to solve that. And here was Srila Prabhupada speaking. When I saw his picture, I did not understand that he was even male, what to speak of being from India. He was all wrapped up in a turban, and actually I felt great comfort because I thought he was an African-American woman, like the one who had cared for me and my brothers so much as children. And so this was very astonishing, and I thought, good sign, because it gave me so much comfort. And I just knew with every word that it was what I was supposed to be hearing. And he spoke about an undaunted task, far more difficult than what I had thought of, but he had all confidence because he was putting himself in the hands of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who first thought I had was, then God exists, because he's speaking to him so intelligently. And he was able to say, your desire will be my success or failure. It won't be up to me to have to be the doer. But by your transcendental arrangement, all things can happen. And you make me dance as you like. And so this was very convincing to me. And I felt completely certain then that I only had to find him, and then I would also be able to find God and all of the answers, even the ones that to questions I hadn't yet thought of. My initiation came via a letter in which Srila Prabhupada said to always chant Hare Krishna, minimum 16 rounds a day, and to follow the 4 regulative principles. And he said that my name Kumkum is the reddish powder used extensively by Krishna and the gopis.
This is just to show how potent Prabhupada's presence was in our lives, even though we'd never met him. At least I didn't. So after a few days, I got what was called devotee foot, means your feet are so sore you can hardly walk. But I still wanted to go out, and my temple president said, no, of course you can't go out. So then I went into the temple room to Prabhupada's Vyasa-san with the big picture of Prabhupada, and I said to Srila Prabhupada, I want to go on book distribution because I know that pleases you. Actually, it was Back to Godhead magazines at that time. And I know that's what pleases you the most. So even if I had to go in a wheelchair, I would go. So then I got the idea to call the hospital. And I told them I needed a wheelchair for my volunteer work. And within an hour, there was a wheelchair in front of the door, and I used the wheelchair until my feet got better. And many devotees used that wheelchair. That's how strong Prabhupada's presence was.
I went to LA, and because Kusa told me to go to Los Angeles at that time because Srila Prabhupada was there. So then I said, okay, Mom, Dad, you got to take me to LA. There's a temple there, I need to go. I wrapped it up, put my sleeping bag together, and I had 6 yards of material that they told me to bring. And I didn't know why, I really didn't understand how to even put on a sari. So I went to LA, and lo and behold, there was this big, huge Sankirtan movement of Christmas marathon. And I walked into the room there, and there all this money jingling, and, and the devotees were coming back from Sankirtan. It was so like hectic, but incredibly beautiful. And that was my first experience when I went to the LA temple. So then the next day in the morning, about 4 o'clock, they told me to take a cold shower. So I took a cold shower. And they helped me put on my 6 yards of material. And they took me to the temple, Jagadatri, Didi, and there was Prabhupada. There was Prabhupada. And when I saw Srila Prabhupada, I knew I had found the truth. And I knew that Srila Prabhupada needed help. I knew he needed help. And that was like later on, but I still, you know, there was a lot to do. So Prabhupada kept talking about, you know, his books. He kept talking about his books and distributing his books. And one time he said, you can preach as much as you want, but as soon as they leave, they'll forget everything. But if you give them a book, then they'll remember. They'll remember. They can go home and study for themselves the books. So he preached a lot about distributing the books.
Then in June '74, we were all visiting the Schloss Rettershof in Frankfurt, because Srila Prabhupada was doing again a tour around Europe, and he was visiting the new Schloss in Frankfurt, which was at that time Hansa Dutta in charge. Then Srila Prabhupada, first we met him in the airport, and I felt, when I saw Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana that we had brought from Amsterdam, and my picture came to life basically, I felt so safe. I met my real father, and I was safe. Prabhupada was going to save me from this miseries of pangs of material nature. So then, at that time, there was the initiation in the Schloss. We had a big circle around, and I was initiated one of the last, but I was happy because Prabhupada actually, he said, first of all, I got to practice how to do it properly. Again, Prabhupada was quite stern, and he corrected every single devotee if they didn't do things properly, they didn't pay obeisances properly, or they didn't say the full principles. He also made us promise, besides the principles, no mental speculation, no frivolous sports, chant at least 16 good rounds every day. Not just 16 rounds, no, at least 16 good rounds every day. That was our promise, and if we didn't say it properly, he was correcting. And then when Prabhupada gave me my beads, because I knew you were not supposed to look into the eyes of the spiritual master, I thought, I'm getting my beads, this is my connection, I'm going to look in Srila Prabhupada's eyes. So I did. And then he said, your name is Nikunjavasini. This is a very nice name, it's a gopi. So I thought, wow, I was the last to be initiated, and I got the nicest name. So I was very pleased. Of course, for 3 days long, I didn't know my name. They asked, oh, you're initiated, what's your name? I said, I don't know, but it's a very nice name, and it's a gopi. And then after 3 days, I found a list somewhere, hang on the, and then I could copy my name, because it's kind of long, and it has some curlies here and there. So I was very, very happy at that time.
It was John Mastami, and Prabhupada was going to be in New Vrindavan. So the whole temple went up. And so one day, maybe on day number 3, we heard that Srila Prabhupada was going to be interviewed by a reporter from the New York Times. And so it was really hard to get into the cabin. It was a small cabin that Prabhupada was staying in. And somehow got into the cabin. We kind of pushed our way in. They kept a lot of the devotees out. But I was determined to get into that room. And so I was in there, and then it was packed. I mean, there were like 50, 60 devotees in there. And so the GBC men and, the leaders, they were like, oh, there's too many people here, Somebody, you all have to leave, you have to leave. It's like, so with this, I was going to, all right, I'm going to, and then some temple president looked at me and said, don't leave. Right, so I'm sitting there, and Prabhupada, it was very interesting, he basically preached. The New York Times reporter asked questions, and Prabhupada just preached to him, just like he was not a reporter, but a prospective devotee. And he liked it. He felt that, he was asking Prabhupada questions about the philosophy and about his movement and how he came to the West. And Prabhupada told the whole story about his spiritual master and everything like that. And it lasted about 45 minutes. And then, again, the leaders told everyone to leave. But this time, I don't think anybody left. Maybe 2 or 3 people had something to do left. So we just sat there. And we thought, well, maybe Prabhupada will say a few things and we'll have to leave, right? So Prabhupada continued his preaching because he was really speaking to us when he was speaking to the reporter, right? And he was just the basic philosophy, right, of Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada was so inspired to, and you would think about it, here's all these basically new devotees. And Prabhupada, he lived in Vrindavan, Radha Damodar temple. He's totally absorbed in the mood of Vrindavan. And here he's just preaching like what we consider the basics, right? But he was so into it. It was unbelievable. And it went on and on and on. And I did ask him a question. Actually, I asked him a question, what is intelligence? And Prabhupada explained it from many different angles of vision. In fact, I think I asked that question to Prabhupada like 5 times. I always wanted to clarify it. It may have been the only question I ever asked him. I always wanted him to clarify it because I didn't really understand. I looked it up earlier. It's like, there's so many different answers. Intelligence means to accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. Intelligence means to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Intelligence means to, these are all the answers he would give, And it's also in his books, his talks, his letters. So then after, it literally went on another 2 hours. He preached to the devotees for 2 hours. In fact, maybe even 2.5 hours. So then Shruti Kirti, who was just become Prabhupada's servant, tried to tell everybody, well, everyone should leave now. It's time for Prabhupada's massage. And he had a massage table in the backyard. It was a warm West Virginia afternoon in the summertime. And so, but it was getting late. It was like around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, still very warm. And Prabhupada kept preaching as he walked out the door. And so he was looking at us and he was preaching to us. So we felt like, well, it would be impolite. We can't listen to Shruti Kirti. We have to follow Prabhupada and hear what he's saying. So the massage starts and Prabhupada is laying on his back like this. And, Shruti Kirti is working on his hands and his feet, his legs. Prabhupada's still preaching like he's in the room. He's not stopping. Quoting Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, little Chaitanya Charitamrita here, telling stories about his spiritual master, and it's just going on and on. And finally, now it's like 3 hours later, right? And it's like everyone's looking at it, pinch me. Is this really happening? And then finally, Shruti Kirti, he said, well, I have to turn Prabhupada over now. I'm going to work on his back. And so you all have to, you should leave. And So it was like Prabhupada kept preaching. And then Sri Dikirti said, well, Prabhupada, you have to relax now, and I have to finish this massage. So Prabhupada said, okay, everyone should leave. And we left. It was a manifestation. Well, I may have not realized that at the time, but it was a manifestation of his inner moods. Like, in other words, Gaur Leela, which is his preaching Krishna consciousness, he's fulfilling the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, every town and village, the prediction of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he appears, that he's just preaching, but it's not. It has something to do with his internal mood and his relationship with Radha and Krishna and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda. It's like he's empowered, they say he's empowered to do this by Lord Nityananda. So it's like it was just flowing. And you can't imitate it.
All the Sankirtan devotees, we were allowed to come back at that time. We didn't see New Vrindavan very much because we were always in the vans. But then we got to follow Prabhupada to one of these huts, and we were outside because it was kind of a smaller dwelling, you might say. And so the men were mostly inside, and we were outside the window. All the windows were open, and everybody's just had their eyes on Srila Prabhupada, and he just looked so graceful and so relaxed, like he was actually in Vrindavan. He wanted to, that was one of his first desires when he came to America, is to have a replica of Vrindavan in America. So, hence New Vrindavan. So Prabhupada was sitting there very relaxed and very beautiful, and we were mostly seeing his profile and just watching every move. So they offered Prabhupada the burfi, and so Prabhupada there was a whole big pile, and he took a few little bites out of maybe 4, 5, 6 pieces, and then he indicated that these pieces of burfi that had the bite, the burfi should go towards us by the window. And we were like, we thought, no, it's going to be the sannyasis or all the men. But sure enough, they put on a little plate, and Prabhupada had said something, and so the plate started to come towards us, and you could see devotees wanting, Prabhupada's keeping his eyes to make sure that it got to us, and there the burfi came to us, and we just all were just, so emotional that Prabhupada loved us so much, and he, out of all those people, he was giving some special attention to us.
There was something extremely rare and special about his glance, that he could see past, present, and future. I felt like totally seen and accepted by him. How do you like that? Totally seen and accepted, totally, and loved. I felt loved. That's what I remember, feeling loved for the very first time.
When this clip is over, or when you go to sleep tonight, as you're closing your eyes, we hope that this will evoke you saying to yourself, how wonderful is Krishna? How wonderful is Srila Prabhupada? Because we're here to speak about Srila Prabhupada. And we may add some details about our own experiences that Krishna gave us, but only in the light of how that shows how appropriate what Prabhupada said to us is. So my service, 1974, I was basically taking care of the cows, but they had me bodyguard at Prabhupada's house from 9 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning, right? Gave me a shotgun, 38 pistol, I'm standing in front of Prabhupada. So it's ridiculous, how can we protect Prabhupada? He's protecting us in every way. So I'm standing there in front of Prabhupada. In those days we call it rank and file devotees. I wasn't a GBC, I wasn't a temple president, I wasn't a sannyasi, I was a bhakta, right? With 2 shoes that didn't match, hippie, penniless, not able or willing or desiring to go anywhere. But I'm in front of Prabhupada's house, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada's light would go on. And then I would hear, him speak. First I thought he was listening to a Prabhupada tape, then I realized, well, that's Prabhupada, he's dictating. He's translating the Bhagavatam, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm outside. I never talk to Prabhupada, you know. So I'm out there in front of the house, and it starts to rain a little bit. So going down on the side of the house, there's a driveway, and underneath the house there's a garage. So I went down, opened up the garage door, and I went standing in the garage door doing my guard duty. And I didn't know that Prabhupada could come down through the house to the garage, which he did. No, Prabhupada. Oh my God. I offered obeisances. I said, Prabhupada, how can I serve you? You know, what do you say? You know, here's Prabhupada. Now Prabhupada is like a mountain. Stillness. His senses are not, you know, I think I told you that I saw one video clip where somebody wanted to show me something on the clip, and they put it up fast forward, and there were all these devotees around, and they were all like this, and Prabhupada was just like this. So that's what the scene was like there. Prabhupada was like that mountain, and I was just like, you know, crazy, like how could, which. So when I asked him, Prabhupada, how can I serve you? He went like this. You can go where I won't go. Can you hear his voice? You can go where I won't go. So Prabhupada had just flown from Tokyo to San Francisco to Los Angeles to Dallas to Chicago to New Orleans to New York to Pittsburgh, and then he was going back to New York. He was going to fly to London, go to India, and he was traveling all with 1974, right? Meanwhile, I didn't have any means to go anywhere, you know. I said, Prabhupada, where won't you go? He said, to the future. I was like, what does he want me to build a time machine? He wants me to go to the future? How do you get to the future, you know? And then he said, and how you treat the people there, you show them how Krishna loves them. And I just went like this. I couldn't process what he just told me to do. Of course, it's an instruction for all of us. It's an instruction, go where I won't go, and how you treat the people there, show them how Krishna loves them. And while my eyes were closed, he left. He went back upstairs. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. That was it. He just laid that on me and split. You know, that's 47, 48 years ago. Okay.
Then the first time I actually got to see him was in Atlanta, where I had moved soon after reading that Back to Godhead. And he was only going to have a short layover in the Atlanta airport, maybe 2 hours, and so we didn't try to bring him to the temple, but the temple president, who was Balavanta Prabhu, and his wife Balavi, and Tara Dasi and Jaya came up from Tallahassee, and we rented a VIP room at the airport, and I got to make a cushion for him because we didn't want him to have to sit directly on the, who knows how clean they were, the seats. And so I was very excited about that. And then when he finally came, I was just completely satisfied. This was the, just to catch a glimpse of him was the satisfaction of everything that I had hoped, but far more so. And so there were a few people that we had told he was coming, and as many people as could crowd into this one room, and some guests. And one of the most important things that I remember from that talk was there was an Indian man there who was not coming to the temple, but somehow the temple had figured out how to reach out to him and brought him to have darshan with Srila Prabhupada. But he was a scientist, and so Prabhupada was talking with him, just chatting, and he asked the man what kind of science, and he says, we do experimentation on animals. And I noticed that Prabhupada was very unplussed. He was just completely composed And he said, "What animals?" And the man said, "Oh, cats mainly." And again, Prabhupada was just as cool as you could imagine. And he said, "All the animals don't get a chance?" And I could tell how he was very sarcastic. And I had never seen this in such a exalted person. I had never known that sarcasm could still be helpful to somebody. And you could see in the man, it just really helped him to be a little contemplative at least. This was amazing to me.
That same year, 74, I was married. I got Brahmin initiation, because that was, Prabhupada actually stopped us from taking Brahmin initiation too soon. They had written a recommendation letter to Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, "You are going too fast." So that was probably October. We had to do a Brahmin test. There was 10 questions, what the significance of the Guru. And then instead of being initiated second in October, it was November. So then we got Brahmin initiation. And then we went in 76, we went to meet Srila Prabhupada again. And there was another wonderful realization for me after Srila Prabhupada installed the Krishna and Balaram deities in New Mayapur. Because it was like this, everyone was always visiting all the temples. Whenever Prabhupada would be in Europe, he'd be in France. All the devotees from Europe went to France. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada had been quite sick. But because Bhagavan was really begging to, "Please Prabhupada, you come, we have the deities to be installed." And so Prabhupada came, and there was three incidences. One was an amazing experience when Prabhupada was bathing the deities, Krishna and Balaram. And there might be a picture of this, but it's not a very, very well-known picture. Srila Prabhupada was first bathed with the big conch shells. He would bathe Lord Balaram, and then we had to bathe, and they were all about the same size. So they are like 3 instead of 2, Krishna and Balaram and Srila Prabhupada. So like friends. And then when Prabhupada had to bathe Krishna, he had to lean forward to bathe Krishna in front of Balaram, and he put his hand on Balaram's shoulder and then bathe Krishna like this. So when I saw this, I said, "Wow, this is spiritual world." They're the 3 friends together, Krishna and Balaram and Srila Prabhupada. Then a little later we had the big feast. Well, first we had the initiation again, 76, and I had one friend. She said, "Oh, how am I supposed to do?" I said, "You pay dandavats like this, and you say all these things," because I just had it myself. She said, "Are you sure?" Because in those days we were not doing dandavats anymore. It wasn't allowed. I said, "I'm sure, I did it. You should do it." And when she did that, actually, I was looking at Prabhupada while she was paying her full dandavats in front of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had this big smile on his face, and there was a picture made of that. So when she got up, I said, Prabhupada was very pleased.
I did have darshan a few times with Srila Prabhupada. And one time in LA, they had made a beautiful garden for Srila Prabhupada. And in that garden, they had made his Vyasa-san in the corner there, and flowers, everything. It was so beautiful. It's still there? It's still there. So they wanted to, they called for the ladies, book distributors, to go have a little darshan meeting with Srila Prabhupada. So that was pretty special. Yeah, that was special. So I sat down there. It was just a few of us, really, you know. There was Vrindavan Vilasini, and I think Gauri and Jadharani, and other devotees that I distributed books with at the time. And Srila Prabhupada was just so wonderful and talking to us. And I do remember one thing he said, that here in Los Angeles, many people go surfing. The devotees were talking about surfing, and then Prabhupada underneath his breath, because I was right there, and I could hear Prabhupada very clearly. And he was saying something underneath his breath, you know, and I'm like listening, you know, and he was like, suffer. So then, the devotees, the sannyasis that were there close, they said, Prabhupada, no, it's not surfers, it's surfers, Prabhupada, they're surfers. They're surfers, and they go in the water, you know, and they ride the board. And they were trying to explain this to Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, yes, he said, and they will ride the waves just like the dolphins, and they go right through the waves just like the dolphins. So they are getting ready for their next body. And, and we all just laughed, and Prabhupada's little hands were all pink, and they were so beautiful. And we were just so blown away by his exuberance and his vision. He had such vision. And sometimes when you go to the airport, okay, they would complain. The employees, they would complain, you guys leave all these petals on the floor. We gotta, sweep them up. It's a big thing, you know. There's like 200 of you that come to the airport and got all these flower petals everywhere. Anyway, so they told Prabhupada that, right? And Prabhupada said, He said, so they are not complaining for all the cigarette butts on the floor, you know. And Prabhupada did so many things at the airport. You know, he would sit down waiting for his flight, and, you know, we'd be there like around him. And, you know, this lady that was there visiting our temple, she was a nurse, and she was, you know, a little eccentric. Anyway, she loved Prabhupada. So she was there, you know, seeing Prabhupada off. And so a few other sannyasis were sitting there on the airport bench, you know, with Srila Prabhupada waiting for the flight, and Prabhupada had his cane, and he was like this, you know, just waiting for us, looking around, you know. And then he was looking, he looked at the nurse, and then he looked at the devotees sitting on the chair, all the guys. He actually told them to leave so that this lady could sit down. Okay? Prabhupada was the perfect gentleman.
I also came into a darshan in Prabhupada's quarters, and it was tight. There were so many devotees there, many sannyasis, many dignitaries. People came whenever Prabhupada was anywhere. They would flock. So it was very crowded. And I came in a little bit late. Prabhupada saw me at the door. I started to walk in. And what he did was he motioned for them to move aside, and make a space for me to sit. And it just felt like I was so cared for, that Prabhupada had so much respect, even for me, a young woman. He was so considerate.
So Prabhupada, for us, was our service. 3 times only I got the great fortune of seeing Srila Prabhupada. The first time we were in O'Hare Airport, and we were distributing books there. It was a great honor to have a spot in the airport. And so Srila Prabhupada was coming through with his entourage, and we all wanted to run over and see Srila Prabhupada, of course. But our Sankirtan leader at the time had said, just continue distributing books, and this will please Prabhupada more. So there's Prabhupada going by, and we were thinking, and we saw, even though he had a short stature, 5'2", 5 foot 2 inches, still he seemed like to be the tallest personality, the biggest personality in this little entourage of maybe 5 or 6 men. And so then all of a sudden Prabhupada stopped. This memory is just so clear in my mind. He stopped, and you know how it is when somebody stops, boo, 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 like that. So then Prabhupada, he turned towards us, and with his cane, he went like this to all of us who were distributing his books, and we were just mesmerized, and we just felt like we were just getting so much mercy from Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was all we could see, all the thousands of people all around us. O'Hare is one of the busiest airports in the world, and there was just so much commotion, but all we could see was like Prabhupada was just letting us see individually him, like when Krishna, you know, when he's in the circle of the cowherd boys, he makes each cowherd boy feel like Krishna is only with them. So it felt like that. And we felt later when we were discussing, Prabhupada was really giving us his mercy at that time, because it wasn't so easy to distribute books in America. Prabhupada liked that about the American devotees. We were very courageous and very bold and fearless, and we were in so many situations, but we never felt alone. We always felt Prabhupada was with us.
Now, we had a pujari who had come from, I believe she was from Chicago, it might have been Detroit, and somehow she had it in her mind that the deities needed to be painted. And not only did she not ask Prabhupada about that, and they were going to be installed on Tuesday, she also chose a paint that was not quick drying. It would have taken weeks to get completely dry. And so there she was doing all of this, and Prabhupada just came in to oversee. One time when I happened to be in there, and this was definitely an example of finding out that his physical stature was so much shorter than you ever imagined, because it happened as I was leaving the room, and there was about this much wall, and as he came out, I had to make myself fit into that. There was nowhere else to go. And I got a glimpse of his extreme humility, but his desire that things be taken seriously enough to be nice for the deities. And so he said to the pujari, who had not conferred with him and who was doing this thing which they had been beautiful as they came. And so he raised his voice and he said, "I am right here." And she just said, "Oh, but Prabhupada, Govardhan," the pujari in Detroit where she'd been changed, and Prabhupada raised his cane like this, and you could hear him. The way the building was made, there was an opening, and then it went into what had been the sanctuary, and everyone who was in there said that his voice just resounded in there, and he just raised his cane like this and said, "Who is Govardhan?" And then he was completely composed when he went striding out of the room. And of course, everyone knew he cared very much for Govardhan. But his point, which I took very seriously, was knowing that he is the guru is the most important point there. Whether we could understand or not, what to speak of whether we would have come up with the idea ourselves. The most important thing is that we're trying to be servants of the Guru so that we can serve the deity.
I mentioned it already, that he's very humble. And I also, because I didn't witness this personally, but I've seen it a few times when I'm observing videos of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada is speaking with Ramaswar, they're making some financial arrangements. And Prabhupada, I don't know how you could do this without false ego, but he did. He told, I don't know which devotee he was talking about, he told Ramaswar, "Tell so-and-so that this is not his money, it's my money." How did you say something like that without false ego? But he did. It's amazing, right? Usually it's like, "It's not his, it's mine." Or he could stop a kirtan and tell someone, "I'm not supposed to follow you, you're supposed to follow me." If someone's playing the mridanga too quick, so he stops the kirtan and tells the devotee, "You have to follow me." But there's no false ego. So for me, that Prabhupada never acted in a way that was for his satisfaction. It was always for Krishna's satisfaction. And he loved us, and he was willing to train us and correct us, which is sometimes maybe a little uncomfortable. He didn't get carried away by the fact that we loved him so much. He wanted what was best for us. So when he knew that we could be corrected, he would correct us. And fortunate are the ones that were with him that he could do that day in, day out.
At the time of the installation of Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji in Dallas, my husband Rishabdev got to be very involved. He had been acting as the temple commander, and everything was in such a flurry to have only 3 days to get ready, and so constant conferring with Prabhupada about what he wanted and how the ceremony should happen. There was plenty of space. We had an awful lot of space, but not a lot else. And so things were not beautiful. The walls hadn't been painted in years, and the floor was still peeling, and none of these things matter. You could see that it was Prabhupada's desire to establish their lordships here, that he could see that they had arrived to help take care of the children. And so my husband got to talk with him a lot about exactly how he wanted things to be, or to sit in on him telling other people how they should be. Now, Satsarup Maharaj, our GBC, had suddenly flown in when this was going to happen, and he was also trying to get as many instructions as he could, especially about the ceremony itself. And we didn't have much. In fact, we had a plastic wash bucket for the deities to stand in for the Abhishek ceremony. Now, because the deities had just been painted and they were still wet from being painted, my husband got to carry them, and Srila Prabhupada motioned for him to set them into the wash buckets for the bathing, and they were wrapped in fabric, but still the paint was oozing out everywhere. And when my husband set Kalachandji into the bucket, and he turned to first to give his pranam to Prabhupada before he bowed down, and Prabhupada could see his clothing was covered in all the colors, the bright red, bright blue, and so he nodded, like there was this communication that happened, that he was smiling, my husband was smiling like anything to Prabhupada, who was trying to give some further indication of what to do. And the person who was to be the Brahmin priest actually pouring everything, other Brahmins were reading, but with Satsarup Maharaj. And because of the wetness, and the Pujari had given Satsarup Maharaj strict instructions, don't let the water go above their neck. She was thinking, I guess, that once they're dried off and dressed, nobody will know that they've got smeared paint all over them. But Prabhupada was definitely an example of his humor and mocking, because he kept saying, the Pujari had told Satsarup Maharaj, whatever you do, don't let the water go over their head. And so he was only pouring like this, and in an Abhishek ceremony, all of the ingredients go over the deity's head, and finally a lot of water. But Satsarup Maharaj just couldn't do that, or the deities would have looked terrible. And so he just had to, I don't know, he acted like he hadn't heard that or something, because Prabhupada kept saying, over their head, again and again. Every single time he offered something, Prabhupada would say, over the head. He was very emphatic, but it was all in jest, and you could see that. It was the best use of a bad bargain.
After we were all in New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada was there, and Srila Prabhupada had been invited to the University of Pittsburgh to speak at a very large auditorium called the Syria Mosque. And then the roadshow was there. And there had been some controversy about the roadshow, whether or not it was Mangalananda was he wrote all the songs, he was the main singer, but there were a lot of devotees involved. And finally the lecture ended, and then I got a seat right near where I knew that Prabhupada was going to sit. I guessed, okay, Prabhupada's going to sit in the middle, right in the front. So I ran over there and I got behind. I sat in that seat. And then, sure enough, Srila Prabhupada sat right in front of me. I was shocked. I mean, I had to make sure I didn't kick his seat, like in a movie theater. So, and Rupa Nuga was sitting right beside Prabhupada. And I was, really right there, right behind him. And so, the play was about hippies turning into happies. But when I was in Florida, we had seen the play in Tampa, at the University of Tampa. And it seemed like the devotees, I was thinking, well, the devotees are really like wearing the hippie wigs and dressing in tie-dye. And they would, sometimes they wouldn't get out of character after the play, you know, and I was thinking, this could get nipped. But there were other devotees who thought, no, it's perfect, this is great, Prabhupada's going to love it. So I was like wondering, I thought, I bet Prabhupada's going to nip it, I bet he's going to nip it. So Srila Prabhupada's sitting there and he suddenly looks at Rupanuga and he says, "These are our men, Rupanuga?" "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." And then again, like a minute later, he goes, "Rupanuga Prabhu, these are our men?" "Oh yes, Srila Prabhupada, these are our men." I don't think Rupanuga got the gist of what he was saying, you know. And he was wondering why he was saying, you know, he said it like about 5 times, right? So I was like, I know he's going to nip the play. And then, sure enough, the next day, Prabhupada made an announcement that it should stop. And then he wrote a letter about saying, you know, that about hippie seeds and how, you know, devotees seem like they may be more interested in becoming hippies again, and that we shouldn't give the public what they want. We should, you know, we're doing this to please Krishna and the spiritual master, and that's our standard. We're not going to compromise. So Prabhupada saw it as some kind of compromise, and he nipped it.
So Prabhupada was very merciful. I remember that when I was at the lecture in which I was going to get initiated, we were very fatigued. We worked very hard. We ate a lot of prasadam. It was hard to focus sometimes, and I felt like I wasn't connecting properly, and I couldn't hear him. And so I called his name in the middle of the lecture. Prabhupada. And people were looking at me, but Prabhupada also looked at me, and he wasn't upset. He just heard someone calling his name, and he turned to look at me, and I became peaceful because I knew he wasn't upset, and I was embarrassed, but I was desperate. And so at that moment, Prabhupada just stopped, looked at me for a second, calmed me down, and just kept speaking. I don't know what the other... I remember my temple president asked me later, what was that all about? I didn't answer, because I didn't really know either. All I know was that I was so frustrated and Prabhupada was so merciful. He didn't get angry that I disturbed his lecture. He felt my anxiety, that I really wanted to hear him. So that's very merciful. He could pick up on the heart, huh?
When Srila Prabhupada was offering the artik and my husband got to stand at a short distance away, he told me that it was like the very first time he had seen Srila Prabhupada. And that was when he could not even bow down because tears shot out of his eyes like crocodile tears. That expression, just involuntarily, just tears came out with so much affection, so much gratitude that he got to witness and to be that close to this very intimate pastime. And we all had our conceptions of what it was going to mean now about having deities, but he knew that Srila Prabhupada was seeing at a different level. He was communicating with the deities. And when Srila Prabhupada turned around, he looked right at my husband and he said, "The deity's name is Kalachandji." That means black moon. And it was a long time. We were seeking and seeking, but it was a long time before we finally saw there's a very, very slight white ring in the marble, right perfectly around Kalachandji's face. So black moon.
So when I met Srila Prabhupada the next time, that was in London, then my husband at that time was taking cancer treatment, radiation treatment, and so he was at the manor, and Prabhupada was visiting, and so he told me to come from Amsterdam. He said, "Just come, Srila Prabhupada here. You can take association from Srila Prabhupada. And at that time Prabhupada was very sick. And I remember still they had wrapped all the doors with thick cloth because the banging of doors would disturb Srila Prabhupada. And then he would come for darshan. They would carry him down the stairs on a palanquin. And then they would make him take him in front of the deities, greet the deities like this, and then they would take him to the place where the Vyasasan was, and he would sit there. So then, instead of giving class, we would just do kirtan. Prabhupada wasn't giving class, and it was very special because we got to take darshan of Srila Prabhupada. Instead of, usually when there's class, you hear Srila Prabhupada, and this time we're just gazing at him. And he would have his feet a little swollen from the blood flow disturbance, and his feet were looking so beautiful, like baby feet, so soft and little swollen, beautiful. So it was a beautiful meditation. And I had my daughter on my lap. And sometimes at that time, then when Prabhupada he had his hands on his lap, and then he would move his thumbs. And then that was a sign for all the devotees to jump up in ecstasy and start to dance. But at one point, so we were all sitting and gazing at Prabhupada. I was gazing at Prabhupada and filling my eyes with the nectar of Prabhupada's darshan. But my daughter, with the kirtan, she jumped in on my lap, because she was enthusiastic, sitting on the kirtan. So all the time her face was in front of my eyes. So I got disturbed about it, and I took her little arms and put her down, like, sit still, because I want to look at Prabhupada. And I looked very eagerly at Prabhupada, and he looked me right in the eyes, very stern again. So like, what are you doing? You're stopping your child from enjoying the kirtan and being engaged in this bliss just because you want to enjoy gazing like this. And it took me like, I got my personal instruction here. I have to take care of my children. I take care of my child. So I was very surprised about this, and I thought, oh, I might have imagined it. But then little by little, over the years, these stories were coming out that especially in that meeting when Srila Prabhupada was there, he had contact with every single devotee in the room, and they all have a story like this. I heard them in the corridor already talking, oh, this Prabhupada was looking right at me, or Prabhupada was instructing me this way, that way. I said, wow, it was actually true, that was a personal instruction, which I was supposed to take to heart.
So we're in New Dwarka. Again, we came back to New Dwarka after being in Berkeley. And I get a call from Mukunda Maharaj that Alice Coltrane, who is the wife of John Coltrane, one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time, who composed music to the Bhagavad Gita in the 1950s, that she was a subscriber to the Back to Godhead, and that she had contacted the temple to see if some devotees could come and teach her how to cook. And she lived in a fancy part of LA. So the devotees there, Mukunda Maharaj knew that I was a follower of Satchidananda Swami, and so was she. So we knew each other, but I was a peon, she was a VIP there, as was Peter Max and others. They were of the upper echelon. I was just a yoga teacher. But they chose me to go with them. So Brahmananda Swami, Mukunda Maharaj, and I and a few other devotees would go to her house every week and teach her how to cook and offer food, bhoga, and turn it into prasadam. We would have kirtan with her. Sometimes she played her piano. She also played the harp. You know, she was a musician herself. And she was also a yoga teacher herself and had followers. She had a spiritual name, Turiya Sangeetananda, but she was very attracted to the devotees, and she was especially attracted to Srila Prabhupada. And so we were doing this for about a month. And at about 6 weeks, she contacts the temple, and she tells them that she would like to go to India to have darshan of Srila Prabhupada. This was 1977. So it was in the spring of 77 this all came about. And she asked for someone to come with her who knew India, who was able to navigate India, who had been there before and could help her. So then I went before the deities, and I went before Rukmini and Dwarkadish, and I said, dear Lord, if you want me to come to India, that would be really wonderful. There's nothing I would like better than to be with Srila Prabhupada in his home, in your home. And if there's any way that you could make that happen, I would be just so grateful. It would mean so much to me to be there with Prabhupada. And I just let it go. And you know, sometimes you feel like there's a prayer that goes somewhere, that actually gets delivered. So I walk back to my apartment, and the phone is ringing. And Dharma Jaksha answers the phone, and he says, "Oh, Rasangi, Alice Coltrane's on the phone for you." And I said, "Oh, wow." I didn't know why. And she said, "Rasangi, God just told me that I'm supposed to take you to India with me." Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. So we're going to make plans to go for the month of June. Oh, okay. So I just got my passport. I put things in order, and then we left. We flew out of LAX, and we landed in Delhi, and were picked up by Brahmananda Swami, taken to Vrindavan. We had a brief darshan with Srila Prabhupada in the beginning. Prabhupada was very weak at the time. You know, this was June of 77. He left his body in November. So Prabhupada was gracious and very loving, and he gave his blessings. And he also asked Tamal Krishna, "Who is this devotee with Miss Coltrane?" "Oh, her name is Rasangi." He said, "Very, very nice service." He appreciated that I was there by his mercy only, and yet he saw it as good service, and I was very appreciative of that.
Years later, when my husband was also the temple commander and the urgent need for more funds was very predominant, so my husband was elected by the temple president to go out and sell incense, which had started in Los Angeles, and so you could get big boxes of incense and have it repackaged into small things, and then if you could sell that, then there'd be some income. And he had to go out and do this. He made a van, he outfitted it so that there was a plank in the back that he could sleep on, and underneath would be all of the incense, and he couldn't come back until he had sold it all. And this could take weeks, and it was not a very happy life. There wasn't much to do. There was no association. He was by himself. He didn't have a kitchen or anything, but he decided he would talk to Prabhupada about it, his feeling. Maybe we could start a business in the temple so we'd all still be together or something like that the next time Prabhupada came. But then when Prabhupada came for a visit, my husband got darshan. He got to enter darshan with a temple president who was not Mohanananda. By then it was a different person. And my husband was sitting there waiting to ask his question, and the temple president started telling Srila Prabhupada, "I don't think this is a good service for me. I'm not really a city person. I like to be around the ocean." And this was very grave. Prabhupada was very grave. And his answer was, "You pick one service and you dedicate your life to that." So my husband took that as his own instruction. He didn't need to ask. He knew that was what it was. And thereafter, he'd go out, and he got many, many blessings from listening to tapes. He got many realizations because Prabhupada had put in him that service necessity is the important thing.
And so Sudama was telling me all these stories about Srila Prabhupada, and we were buying fabric for the deities and things like that. And so one day we were going to go up to Srila Prabhupada's room, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get into Srila Prabhupada's room and get to speak to Prabhupada. And so I get into the room just a little bit, and the Prabhupada motioned that he wanted to speak to Sudamas privately. I wanted to have a private talk with him. So I had to leave the room, and I waited outside the room. And I just hung out, and they were there like maybe 15 minutes. And then after Sudama comes out wearing Prabhupada's gold watch. And we had all heard that Prabhupada had been given a gold watch, right? And like 5 days later, he gives the watch to Sudama. Okay, then there was this lady, and this was in the winter. This was when Prabhupada came in December 73. She had been knitting a sweater for Srila Prabhupada, a wool sweater. And for months, like it took her like 2 months. We wondered, why is she knitting during Bhagavatam class? Then Prabhupada came and she would sit in front of Prabhupada and knit. She was knitting the sweater, right? So one day, after the lecture, Prabhupada comes, he comes out, or he came back from the morning walk. Everyone was waiting for him to come back. And so he stopped and he was talking to the devotees, especially the women who didn't get to go on the walk, in front of the, New Dwarka LA temple. The area used to be grass, but now it's concrete, that area right there. And so she gives the sweater to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, Srila Prabhupada, I knitted you this sweater. So Srila Prabhupada took the sweater off, gave it to a devotee, who now has Prabhupada's sweater, puts the sweater on, right, and starts preaching, giving like a little darshan, a little talk to the devotees, So we must be serious about this Krishna consciousness. We don't know how much time anyone could die at any moment, And so suddenly Prabhupada takes the sweater off. He gives it to like one of the sannyasis. And now he's got this Mataji, she just burst into tears. But Prabhupada didn't put the sweater back on. And he spoke to her later. He was gentle with her, he talked to her. But you could think, well, Prabhupada was so detached. He was detached. But actually he was distributing prasadam. If you got his sweater, or you got his watch, and he was doing it all the time. Because we had also heard one time that Prabhupada had a Rolex. That's when the Rolex, they would give Prabhupada Rolexes, collect money and give him Rolexes. He would give them away. Then you'd see some sannyasi wearing the Rolex, and people would be thinking, just see, they didn't realize that Prabhupada gave him a Rolex.
So then Prabhupada, we were going one by one up to the Vyasasan, and we were each getting, and I was thinking, oh, Prabhupada, he's going to read my heart. He's going to see that I'm having doubts and wanting to leave, but then maybe he'll see that I really don't want to leave him, and just all this stuff going on in my mind. So finally I was right in front of Srila Prabhupada, and I felt like I was just completely in a bubble, like in a bubble of his, like a serenity, and this whole peace came over me. And I remember I could barely see Prabhupada. My eyes were filled with tears, and somebody had to kind of push me forward, and the cookie went into my hand, but I very distinctly heard in my heart Prabhupada saying that I am always with you, do not be fearful. So those two sentences, I am always with you, do not be fearful. No matter what kind of difficulty we were in, or that I would be in the future, those two sentences from Srila Prabhupada carried me through so many difficult situations.
What was unique for me about Srila Prabhupada, amongst the exploration of looking at other gurus in my quest at the time, was the fact that everything was backed up so thoroughly by Shastra. And we had access to that at that time through Bhagavad Gita, Easy Journey to Other Planets, you know, the books that we had, and the genuine disciples who had grasped the philosophy and were representing the Shastra and him. So, although I was aware that these lucky souls had had lots of association with him when I was a new devotee, somehow or other I very much felt his presence. I understood the order, especially the order as it was coming down to distribute his books. The movement was on fire at that time. The fact that he was on the planet created these unbelievably ecstatic kirtans wherever you went. The austerities that we performed at that time kind of, you know, it brought us so close to him. We knew that he was with us. The whole mission was absolutely vibrating with that energy, and there was a tremendous solidarity that one felt with other temples. And then for me, even seeing the early Vyasa Puja books, although I didn't know any of these sannyasis, but if I would see the images of these sannyasis who were absolutely 300%, you know, devoted to the mission, and one knew that they were getting their direct interaction with him, that all had its potency. The potency of Srila Prabhupada, for me, it permeated absolutely everything. Everything. But again, you know, if I'm in Silicon Valley at the temple and I'm conversing with, you know, an Indian family, and I'll say, you know, that I was in India and some of my stories there, I've had people say to me, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And that really gets me. Of course, it's not me, it's Srila Prabhupada. But, you know, that's where, as a disciple of Prabhupada, one feels so humbled by the vision, you know, who he is, and the vision and his enormous compassion and generosity in what he did for us. In coming and giving us all of this.
So then Srila Prabhupada was in his rooms in New Mayapur, and that was in 1976, and the devotees were on the lawn taking prasadam. And when Prabhupada looked out of his room, he saw all the devotees all lined up for prasadam and happily taking prasadam. Prabhupada was so pleased. And one of the devotees looked up and saw Prabhupada there, so we all paid obeisances and we said, Jai Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada, he put his arms in front of the window, he puts his arms up like this, and he's, you know, like greeting us. He was so happy. And at that time he said to Bhagavan, you get me 3 castles or 4 castles like this, where the devotees can live together and take prasadam and be happy. So he was very, very pleased. Then that same day after they were going for a walk, we were all following Srila Prabhupada on the walk. I was with my daughter, and she was 4 months old, like this, so it was summer 76. And then Prabhupada, at one point, he sat behind, under a tree, and there was a little desk in front of him, and he's giving Bhagavad Gita class. And I would come back and forth because she would make a little noise, so I would go a little away and come back. And one devotee was asking a question after the class, and so Srila Prabhupada, at the Guru Puja we are singing always that you are my spiritual master life after life. So does that mean that you will come back to save us when we don't make it this lifetime? And then Srila Prabhupada, I just came back. I heard half the question, but I heard the answer. And Prabhupada banged his fist on that little table in front of him, where the book was. And he said, you make it this lifetime, don't make me come back. And that hit me hard. I thought, wow, we have to do this, we have to take it serious. So that's another, that's why I came when I was asked about the quality that Srila Prabhupada, that impressed me the most. Before I used to think his humility, his compassion, but actually in my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, it's always been his gravity, but a gravity full with compassion and concern. Because also when I see that picture of Srila Prabhupada giving me my beads, he's looking very serious, because he knows. I was very enthusiastic. I was 20 years old. I just became of age, actually, 21 years old. I made the best decision in my life, and I was going to do this for the rest of my life. There's a straight path back to Godhead. And very unknowing that this path can come with obstacles and troubles and sideways, and I had no idea at that time, but Prabhupada, I could see it in his gaze. He knew that this was not going to be an easy path, although the perfect path, not easy. So when Prabhupada said that again, he said in Numaipur, he said, I have given you everything. There's no reason why you cannot make it this lifetime.
So I think one of the qualities that most endears Prabhupada to me is his broad-based love, his unconditional love, his patience, such patience, teaching us and being tolerant of our mistakes and forgiving us for mistakes and offenses even. Prabhupada was just such a stalwart. He just, he filled our hearts with love, and he never asked anything from us, actually. He just wanted us to serve Krishna. He wanted us to serve the highest, serve the Supreme, dedicate one life, just one life, to serving Krishna, and gave us the highest benediction of all. Unfathomable, actually, coming from an impersonalist stance, and then transitioning, understanding that God is ultimately a person, the Supreme Person. And then he sends his beloved disciples, his beloved servants, his devotees, to come and fetch us back, to bring us back to him. How much love does that take? That's so much love. And that's what Prabhupada always meant to me, never anything else.
And Srila Prabhupada, from the very beginning, before I even saw him, just when I first read his words, I was struck with how completely devoted he is to God in such a way that it can convince someone that God exists, and his ability to explain that in a way that anybody would be able to be sure, and his unwavering insight into who is this transcendental personality of Godhead, that he was constantly on that plane, not a scholastic or some kind of goodwill. Those were all secondary, and those were all his servitors. Those kind of qualities always came to assist him, but that his real mission was to be an emissary from that transcendental plane, the all-powerful, all-beautiful reservoir of charm and beauty, Sri Krishna, Sri Radha Krishna, and to impart that to anybody that would have some faith in him, would listen to him. He could make everything fine for them. He could put them solidly on that path. And so naturally, he would let us feel that he was holding on to us like that. And so naturally, we wanted to then distribute that whenever we could, and still do. It's still the main thing that everyone needs. People wandering in this world, but as Srila Prabhupada knew, this is temporary. The bad things are still part of the illusion, and by being fixed in that transcendental world, then you could see Srila Prabhupada convincing, and keeping us steadfast.
Prabhupada was magnanimous. He was so magnanimous. He was so just completely emanating the truth. He just wanted to give the truth, the absolute truth, because he came at a time when we were all hippies and druggies and acid. We were just totally confused. It was in the 60s, late 60s when Prabhupada came, and we were just barely just hanging in there. So when he came, we just saw like an incredible light, you know, just an incredible like relief. Just someone who could take us out of the darkness, you know, who could show us, you know, give us guidance, you know, and how to be a good human being, you know. And from just meeting Srila Prabhupada, I became a vegetarian, you know. I've been a vegetarian for 50 years now, and I'm still practicing Krishna consciousness after 50 years. I have my deities at my home, and I chant Hare Krishna, and I have devotee association that I love, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
What strikes me, and I don't like to say what struck me, I don't like to talk about Prabhupada in the past. He reasons ill who says that Vaishnavas die. He's here, he's saying things to us, and his conviction when he said something was not maybe or I think. It was a solid declarative statement with a period. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Please believe me, you're not this body. Razor sharp, simple, declarative sentences that you don't really hear anywhere else.
The first quality that pops into my mind about Srila Prabhupada, well, that he, you know, he was, even though he was just really in his early and mid-70s, he was not in good health. He had those problems with his heart. He had a heart condition. Were we recording? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a heart condition. And so just that he would travel all over the world the way he was doing and basically, you know, staying up like getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and writing, you know, dictating Srimad Bhagavatam and then Chaitanya Charitamrita at that time. He was sacrificing his health. He was sacrificing everything. He didn't care about anything except pleasing his spiritual master. And he was doing that by preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. And you know, you only do that through love. You know, it was a manifestation of his prem, his bhav and his prem. And so, and then of course the other thing, like I was saying, like hearing his, you know, when he would speak sometimes about Krishna and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you know, how, and the pastime, you know, and even just the philosophy, his voice would crack. And he would, you know, we were always listening to Prabhupada's bhajan tapes and his lectures. And you could just, you know, we didn't understand the moods at that time of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. We were very neophyte. But you go back and you listen to it now and you remember and you hear it and it's his ecstasies. And then he even said about his, you know, when these books, these are my devotional ecstasies. These purports in the books. These are my devotional ecstasies. So, you know, it's not easy to detect, but sometimes I get a glimpse of it. And it keeps me going.
So all the devotees went to the airport to receive Srila Prabhupada. And the devotees went a little bit mad. They were jumping over chairs, and actually we got chastised later by Jaya Tirtha Prabhu. That time I think Prabhupada told him that we should behave better. But what I saw was that Srila Prabhupada was coming through the crowd of devotees, and the devotees were moving to the side, like making an avenue for him, and he was extremely humble. He just had he was like this, and they were putting garlands on him. So I thought I had never seen anyone who was so humble in my entire life, that he was just so humble, and I could see that he was not accepting any of this on his own account. He was accepting it for Krishna, which is something that's quite subtle in one sense, but he conveyed it perfectly, that he was not worthy. This is what I saw. I'm not worthy of this glory. This is all Krishna's glory. It was it had a big impact. And I was thinking when I saw him, I'll do anything for you. You don't even have to know that I did it. Just as long as something I do contributes to your happiness. And I knew that his happiness is Krishna's happiness. So I'm not saying that I've mastered that or that I've perfected that or that I think that way all the time, no. But at that moment, and many moments in Prabhupada's association, that's the kind of consciousness that he drew out of me, and I know that he drew out of many others also. And I know that Prabhupada is always available to anyone who wants to connect with him in a mode of service, in a mode of taking shelter. I heard something the other day that, and this I know it applies to Prabhupada, that he loves us. It's about Krishna, but it's also about Prabhupada. He loves us just the way we are, but he loves us too much to let us stay the way we are. So he loves us like a father loves his children, but the father wants to see the children grow and develop and succeed. So that's my meditation on Srila Prabhupada. That's the impact he made on my life. I have to admit, I wish I had more intimate contact with him, but that's up to me. You know? Because many devotees had so much intimate contact, and I'm sure many people wish that they had more. But on the other hand, some of the people who had intimate contact with him didn't stay, so our relationship with Prabhupada doesn't depend on that. So intimate contact, Prabhupada said, by following his instructions.
Jaya